Hi again, Aashka here,
And Lingyu here.
and welcome to the fifth and final lecture in the basics of library and information science, redesigning and prototyping.
So when we think of design, we often think of graphic design, or the visual ways that we represent information and ideas. However, design is so much more than that. Design can also refer to specific methodologies and practices that make products, services, processes, and projects more human-centered and justice-oriented. This type of work also has many names, like design thinking, design research, user-centered research, and human-centered design, just to name a few. At their core, they all focus on a process grounded in three steps: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. Within those three steps, you find methods such as researching, prototyping, testing, and very importantly, making iterative changes based on what you have learned. One of the powerhouses in the human-centered design space is IDEO. One of our assigned readings is their field guide to human-centered design, which goes over the steps of a human-centered design process in more detail. These steps can encompass a lot, so it's worth keeping in mind that you are not trying to do every method for every project. Rather, you are trying to pick the method that works best for a project based on the communities you are working with, the people you are talking to, or the question that you are thinking about.
Inspiration refers to the phase where you're trying to understand people and their lives. What is working for them? What are the pain points? What are their values and needs? Ideation builds on inspiration. In this phase, you're trying to generate a lot of ideas to address the potential ideas and opportunities that you want to test. When you're brainstorming ideas, you are practicing something called divergent thinking, or the creation of as many different ideas as possible. Think about a time that you had an idea that was a little out of left field. Did someone shoot it down for being too expensive or too hard? That type of interaction doesn't help the brainstorm process, so there are a few key rules to remember when you're brainstorming so that we can facilitate the creation of as many ideas as possible. First, you're trying to defer judgment at this phase. Second, you're also encouraging those wild ideas. Third, you really want to build on the topics and ideas that other people have. How can we grow them? Fourth, you want to stay focused on the topic. If you think of something unrelated, put it in a parking lot for later. Fifth, make sure that everyone on your team is focused on the brainstorming process. And sixth, be visual, have fun, draw it out, paper the wall with sticky notes. And lastly, go for quantity. You're diverging. Not every idea has to be the one that you're going to use at this stage. You just have to have ideas to work with.
During the implementation phase, you enact your work and bring it to the world. You are going to now practice convergent thinking, taking ideas that you brainstormed and prioritizing them based on factors including desirability, feasibility, and viability. Desirability refers to whether people are interested in the product or service you are designing. Does it meet their wants and needs? For example, a light rail system in the Triangle area would probably be highly desirable, since people are tired of commuting, traffic on I-40, and paying for parking. Feasibility refers to the technical feasibility of building the product or service. If we continue with our example, it is definitely technically possible to build a light rail system in the triangle, so it does have some feasibility. Lastly, we have viability. Viability typically refers to commercial viability. Is the product financially sustainable? Is there a sufficient market for this product? Is there top-level buy-in to invest in the product? Even if users want something, whether or not it comes to market is a different question. In our light rail systems example, for instance, the idea has been floated to the North Carolina General Assembly. The Assembly made a decision that would have provided funding for the project, but they also imposed an aggressive deadline for the project to get started, or they would kill the project. And then Duke voted against this project, which effectively ended the light rail plan. That is why we do not have light rails in this area. All of this goes to show that if something doesn't hit enough people or decisive people on that sweet spot of desirability, feasibility, and viability, you're probably not going to converge on it. But when you are diverging and brainstorming, it's really beneficial to think of everything possible. That is how you get some of your most creative ideas. It is helpful to think of the three phases of design, again, inspiration, ideation, and implementation, as a loop. You're going to test your ideas to see if they work, and then pick and choose which ones to update and test again. You may implement an idea that works in one moment, but later your users come back and say, hey, we need to modify this based on our new needs. And you don't necessarily have to go back to the drawing board at that point, but you do have to make updates based on what they tell you, which can take you back to the ideation phase.
With all that said, there are cases where design works. Think about something that works really, really well for you. For students, that might be the open source app Zotero, which can help manage citations, sources, quotes, and notes so that you don't have to do them manually. It's simple and it can make your life immeasurably better. On the flip side, there are things that don't work well, often because of oversights in the design process. Another one of your readings, a paper by Joy Buolamwini and Timnit Gebru titled Gender Shades, talks about how machine learning algorithms can be biased and discriminate against people based on race and gender. Because a lot of machine learning algorithms were based on training data sets that primarily included females with lighter skin tones, the facial recognition systems became deeply biased. This means that these systems do not do a great job when identifying females, people with darker skin tones, and males with lighter skin tones. Why does this matter? Because whether or not you believe that our society should be implementing facial recognition systems, that implementation is already happening around us, sometimes with major consequences. In 2023, for example, the Detroit police wrongly arrested a woman named Portia Woodruff, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, based on an incorrect facial recognition match. That type of experience can be deeply traumatizing and affect a person's health and well-being. More to the point, these incidents are not rare. Portia Woodruff's arrest was the third such instance by Detroit police in 3 years. Clearly, facial recognition systems have been designed incorrectly. What can we do to make sure that they're more justice-oriented? This is where design justice comes in.
Design justice was built up from a community who wanted to make design more inclusive and thoughtful by foregrounding people who have historically been marginalized by society. There are 10 principles that guide design justice. 1. Using design to sustain, heal, and empower our communities. 2. Centering the voices of people who are affected by design processes. 3. Prioritizing the impacts of a design over a designer's intentions. 4. Having a theory of change that sees changes as stemming from an accountable, accessible, and collaborative process. 5. Viewing designers as facilitators, not experts. And 6. Believing that people are experts based on their lived experiences and that everyone brings something valuable to the design process. And 7. Sharing design practices with communities so knowledge is not siloed. And 8. Working towards outcomes that are driven by communities and that are sustainable. 9. Working towards solutions that don't exploit people or resources. And 10. Lastly, looking for what already works in communities. You want to make sure you are centering pre-existing customs and traditions.
So how do we do all of this? A key part of the design process is prototyping, which can take a long time but often occurs rapidly. Prototyping is the creation of preliminary versions of a solution for testing. Rapid prototyping refers to the quick testing and iteration of ideas to get findings that can help facilitate your design process. Prototypes do not have to be pretty and polished. They just have to get the point across so that you can test them. Contexts where we prototype include product development and mobile development, but these are not by any means the only places that you can prototype. You can prototype a health intervention, an approach to voter registration, a new way of teaching a complicated topic, or a service. You're ultimately trying a new idea or testing a concept to get feedback. 2 methods for rapid prototyping are storyboarding and role-playing. Storyboarding means visually plotting out elements of your product or service to learn about your idea and get feedback. Let's say that you're frustrated about the process of figuring out how big a carry-on bag should be. You can draw a storyboard illustrating that frustration and your idea, in this case, an app that measures the size of your bag for you using your phone camera to mitigate this problem. You can take this storyboard to other people to get feedback or to get more clarity for yourself. Maybe from making the storyboard, you realize that the app is better if it also includes the standard measurements for each airline within it. Another method is role playing or going out and acting out your idea. In this case, you and a couple teammates could get together to perform your frustration about the carry on bag process and act out what it could look like if you're using the app that you're talking about building. You should probably practice role playing as a team a few times first, but then you can take your role play to other people for feedback. This is a visual, interactive method for rapid prototyping.
There is a lot of writing on the type of rapid prototype you pick for a given project though. If you're working with older adults who are trying to learn how to use Microsoft Word, you're going to have to assume a different technological literacy and then pick a different modality for your rapid prototype. You may want to consider an in-person workshop with printed storyboards or for feedback. If you're working with college students and getting feedback on a design software, you are assuming a much higher level of technical literacy. In this case, a focus group on Zoom where students role-play design tasks in real time may be much more appropriate. To help us make decisions like these, human-centered designers rely on something called a how might we statement, often abbreviated as HMW. How might we statements help us translate problems, ideas, and insights into actionable innovation opportunities. They also help us define an opportunity area to guide the ideation process and ensure that everyone on a project is aligned on the problem being solved and the desired outcome or value for the end user. Common ways to start a how might we question can be how might we improve something, how might we reimagine something, how might we reach some people, like that, and how might we questions are iterative too. You can sit down by yourself or with your team and revise them until you get to one that feels just right. You can also take a draft HMW statement to communities you are working with to get their thoughts and feedbacks on it. Ultimately, the how might we question is a kind of North Star for your project to make sure everyone is heading to the right place and that they are agreed on what the place is. Why do we like HMW statements? Because the way they start help us frame our projects pretty robustly. How? That suggests we don't have a single answer and indicates that we are exploring multiple options. Might, again, emphasizes that there are different paths we can go down. And we brings in the idea of teamwork. At the end of the day, these three words evoke optimism and imply there is a solution, or more than one solution. It's up to our team to come up with them.
Human-centered design is an approach that you can use pieces of in different projects that informs entire fields and that provides valuable mindsets for developing and testing new ideas.
You're going to be thinking through HCD principles for your final project as you redesign your information systems and platforms.
We're really excited to see how you take these principles and iterate through them for your end results.
And since this is our last lecture, thank you so much for joining us this summer.
It has been an absolute pleasure to learn from and with y'all.
For people enrolled in our online classes, please don't hesitate to reach out as you work on your class project or after the class ends.
We'd really love to hear how you're doing and help out if we can.
Stay informed
and stay well.
Peace.